and that's the mother. And so, as we're in these waning moments, perhaps if you would do us the honor of reading on page 19, that paragraph, "In this way, my mother."
Sure. In this way, my mother attempted to uncover a pattern or a system to her grief, but there never did appear to be one, and the pain continued to erupt equally from the sight of an old photograph as from an untwinned sock. But after each entry, my mother would go on to conclude, it should not happen again. And this conviction that unhappiness in herself and later in her children should be staved off, then eliminated entirely, originated from that same source within her that assured her that the progress that my father was making on his boat, and that my mother was making on my father, and that my father's words were making on her heart, would be measurable and lasting things upon which each of us could build.
Well, one of the seminar members reads it the first time, and the word that came to mind was hope. They read it a second time, and they wrote this sentence: words of love and hope are so powerfully gripping, even if self-deceptive at times. They read it a third time. This is the paragraph they wrote. The words of love and hope that held her mother captive for so many years are what hold all of us who love and hope. But there is a blurry line that separates love from desperation. It is so easy to put one foot over that line and not to realize it. It is so easy to live in both realities and not see the self-deception of all players. And they read it a fourth time. And I should mention they have earplugs in the whole time they're reading this and going through it. Her mother's attempt to uncover a system of her grief is so reminiscent of people in psychotherapy who are trying to understand themselves and their personal history. Some learn so much, while others seem to get nowhere. This makes me think of Hannah Arendt, who said that we really cannot know ourselves, so there is no point to dedicating too much effort to that end. She also said that so long as we are thinking, we are not acting. The act of thinking is, by definition, impractical. What a damning statement.
Yeah, when I read that statement, I thought, no, there's something mixed up there.
There comes a time when thinking and ideas stop, and a decision is made. The mother in this case just could not leave her comforting world of ideas, so she could never come to a decision on how to deal with her dysfunctional life. How would you respond to that, Ms. Skibsrud?
Well, I don't know if I agree about like that there comes a point when thinking and deliberation and stops, and that action begins, because I feel that all action, I mean, that just in the way that we're talking about the present and the past is always implicit in the present, that I think that thinking and deliberation and that process continues in the action. So I think obviously then there's a distinction that that needs to happen, or needs to be teased out about okay, so remaining within like a world of thinking that becomes ineffectual, or that your thinking becomes ineffectual in terms of its impact on your own life or the lives of the people around you, but that I don't think that, in my estimation, that there's ever can be or should be a clear separation between that thinking and that action, that the two need to be consistently, a part of one another, to integral to one another.
In the visual arts, we speak of space and negative space. And what struck me in reading your novel is that you had this uncanny ability to articulate, literarily, negative space. There is a negative space in this book. The idea of the potential never realized, of the thought never acted out, the house never completed. There's always, there is, like the sword of Damocles, this negative space that really is the substructure of the novel, and that you elaborate quite.
Oh, thank you. I can't tell you how nice and wonderful it is to hear that, because, well, negative space is something that is very, I'm interested in a lot of different ways, and actually my dissertation for my PhD that I'm working on now at UDM is on Wall Stevens, and the title is The Nothing That Is, and the thrust of that is negative space, which I became completely infatuated by Barthes' Camera Lucida, and this idea, mostly in two, and it's interesting about this idea of the thinking and the action and the sort of abstract and the practical, which I thought, I think that was the first time that I was really struck by how that can be articulated, that relation between, or, in terms of, Barthes' discussion of the photograph and of technology, but he's talking about it in such abstract terms, and like of locating what he calls the essence of his mother, while at the same time critiquing essence. And this was really the first time that I sort of opened up for me just just how exciting it can be to talk about concrete aspects of our life in abstract ways, or how that abstraction or the negative space or is always implicit in the concrete. And so that sort of then, that was back in 2004 or whatever at Concordia, in a class that I was taking there, and that sort of stayed with me, and then has now formed still large as a part of my dissertation that I'm doing now, and this idea of negative space. So yeah, that's very, very
accepted.
Yeah, and so important to me. So it's really wonderful to me that you found that in the Sentimentalists as well.
Well, here's one last on that same passage, In This Way, My Mother. The first word that came to mind was hope. The first sentence they wrote, clinging on to hope, and final bursts of resilience. And then, reading it a third time, they wrote a paragraph. Sadness stemming from a place where hope comes from. They become confused, in orbit around each other. They feed each other. They block each other. It's the chaos and the order, the rational and the irrational. Hope can fool the soul. It can blind the spirit. But it has no limits. There is always hope. It's a lasting thing when everything has gone. It's the emergence that never fades. It may morph, but it never disappears. And then reading it a fourth time with your earplugs. The book has a sense of purpose, of journey, of process, being blown in the estuary, asking and describing to ourselves, in the quiet parts of our minds, an imaginary path that once in a while traverses truth. Here, aiming towards the elimination of sadness, quote, the unhappiness should be staved off and then eliminated entirely, end of quote. This seems to be the only one that has a final goal, a product in mind, rather than an imaginary journey where direction is an illusion. Maybe it comes towards the end of hope, when you lose motivation for process, when you wish there were a goal, an end, a highest point, something symbolic of completeness. But no, the rock rolls to the bottom of the mountain, and you, Sisyphus, have to pick it up again.
Excuse me, I have to leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I enjoyed bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, final words, Ms. Skibsrud.
Just thank you. I just found it really enriching to talk to you all and hear these wonderful passages and reflections, and it just feels, I feel honored that such wonderful words were sparked by my words. So thank you very much.
Well, we talked about the leap of faith. There's actually a verse in the scriptures that says, "The just shall live by faith." We did, and it worked. We'd like to, if with your permission, take a group picture. Would you allow that?
Sure. Yeah.
So I'll ask Ferdinand up front. We have a